People were telling me last night that like the new street cred in SF is like how many agents you have running in the background. If you have like less than 10, you're like not really cool. 10 to 15 is like how where all the cool kids are at. Or it's like that what's your Anthropic bill while you're away?
Not a dividend.
It's a tale of two clans.
Now, your losses are on someone else's balance sheet.
Generally speaking, airdrops are kind of pointless anyways.
Unnamed trading firms who are very involved.
Alec.eth is the ultimate Ponzi.
DeFi protocols are the antidote to this problem.
All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Chopping Block. Every couple of weeks, the four of us get together and give the industry insider's perspective on the crypto topics of the day. So quick intro is first we got Tom, the DeFi maven and master of memes.
Hello, everyone.
Next, we've got Tarun, the Giga Brain and Grand Poobah at Gauntlet.
Yo.
And joining us today, we've got special guest, the leader of lobsters at Near, Illia. Welcome back to the show, Illia.
Hello, hello.
And I am Haseeb, the head hype man at Dragonfly. We are early stage investor in crypto, but I want to caveat that nothing we say here is investment advice, legal advice, or even life advice. Please see choppingblock.xyz for more disclosures. So it looks like AI has come to save crypto. Crypto is in sore need of saving, and AI seems to be putting the entire economy on its back to drive everything that matters in the world. And there's a lot of excitement going on, continuing to go on about agentic payments, and of course, specifically around this software called OpenClaw. So OpenClaw, if you recall, was previously acquired, or at least acqui-hired or something, by reverse mergered by OpenAI. But they're continuing to build the project. Peter Steinberger, who is the original creator, has continued to ship more features and try to make the whole thing more secure. But many people have tried to build more secure alternatives to OpenClaw, creating this broader ecosystem of what are now called claws, a term that's been coined by Andrej Karpathy, of being these like kind of agentic homebrew agents that run in a loop and kind of do things in the background for you with minimal human intervention. And so one of them is called IronClaw. And so IronClaw is one that's built on the Near AI cloud, which of course is affiliated with the crypto project Near, in which, full disclosure, we are investors into Near. Today, it's, I think, the largest crypto AI project in existence. IronClaw, it's not IronClaw, I mean Near specifically. IronClaw is an open source alternative to OpenClaw that runs in TEE encrypted enclaves in Near Cloud. It's in a WASM sandbox. Credentials never touch the LLM. And it also does some prompt injection protection. I remember looking through the code base and there's like a bunch of regexes in there of like checking.
You forgot the best part. It's written in Rust.
It's written in Rust. And it's written in Rust. That's a big one. Illia, give us a little bit of color. And I think also
all crustaceans. It's like only crustaceans.
Very crustacean theme. That's a big thing. If you don't know, OpenClaw has got a lot of lobster-y things going on. I also saw that you guys are also allowing people to just run vanilla OpenClaw on the Near AI cloud. Illia, talk to us about that. Is AI here to save us in crypto land?
Yeah, so there's two things, right? One is, I think I talked about agents and effectively AI starting to do things on your behalf and being the interface to computing for a while now. I think we talked about some of this even, I think it was 2 years ago at the episode. And it took a little bit a while, right, for like the models to actually enable that activity and like really run in a loop and be able to act this. It first happened with coding agents, right? So Cloud Code, Codex, like few others. They're effectively a general agent that is control your computer, but they were just like tuned for coding, right? They had code in them. What OpenClaw did is effectively removed that limitation and said like, hey, by the way, it can read your email and, schedule your calls. It can go and shop for you on Amazon. It can go and execute other things that, you want to do in your life, right? Your universal assistant and chief of staff. And so that is extremely powerful, right? It effectively changes how we interface with computing. It, removes the need for browsers and apps and kind of goes directly to intent of what you want to do to action that AI does for you. Now, indeed, OpenClaw, great idea, but kind of build like it's a homebrew project in a best way, right? The guy was building it for himself, running it, tweeting about it, and then started picking up steam and more people started to use it. And it's exciting, but it's extremely dangerous for you if you give it all your credentials, if you give it all your things.
Yeah. So actually, I want to add a couple stories before you go further there. So there's a couple stories that went viral about OpenClaw security snafus just over the weekend. So one of them was somebody named Summer Yu, who is the Meta Director Head of Alignment director of alignment at Meta Superintelligence Lab. She was having an OpenClaw that she was experimenting with on like initially like a kind of toy inbox, and then moved it over to a real inbox after establishing like, hey, this seems to work, seems to be pretty controllable. And she asked OpenClaw to suggest some emails to delete out of her main personal email. And she just kind of waited around for the agent to like suggest what email should be deleted. And apparently the OpenClaw just started deleting emails, just started deleting hundreds of emails. And she was like, oh my God, it deleted every email going back before like February 15th or something. And she was like, oh my God, please stop, please stop. And like, it just would not stop. It just kept going. And apparently people suggest that what happened was that there was too much emails in her inbox that caused the context window to overflow, triggered a compaction event. And that compaction is when basically the context window is too big, doesn't fit into the memory basically of the model, and the model then, or not the model, but the harness that you've built will go and basically summarize everything that's happened so far in the context window to shrink it down smaller so you can add more stuff in the context and keep going. So in this compaction, oftentimes information gets lost because you're summarizing, you're not retaining everything. And so presumably what happened was that, very carefully check and, the instructions of do not delete anything before asking me got compacted into something like, the owner wants you to delete emails thoughtfully or something like, something like this. And so it just ended up going wild. This created a very viral story. Now there was a second story that's a little closer to crypto, which was an OpenAI engineer named Nick Pash gave his OpenClaw wallet a $50K in Sol and an X account, as well as access to a trading API, and told it, be yourself and have fun. This OpenClaw proceeded to be named Lobstar Wild, named after Oscar Wilde. And Lobstar Wild created its own meme coin. And there's some guy, some reply guy, who kept begging for Sol, kept begging for free money from this AI. And they begged, I think, something like 50 times, just in the replies every single time asking for money in different ways. And one of the last times that he asked for money, he asked to have 4 Sol for treating his uncle's tetanus, which obviously is not real. But the agent tried to send $300, just tried to say, haha, this is funny. Sure, fine, I'll send you 4 Sol. So the agent was going to send $300, roughly, 4 Sol, to this person, but instead seems to have miscalculated the amount to send them, and instead sent 52.4 million tokens of its own meme coin, which had been worth $400,000 to this user. The recipient immediately dumped them, only got 40K because, of course, it's a very low liquidity meme coin. And this caused, again, another hullabaloo about, it seems like these things are not yet stable enough and secure enough to really want to let them run wild. So with that as a little bit of backdrop, tell us, Illia, about Ironclaw and what you guys are building at Near to try to make this stuff more secure.
Yeah. And so kind of there's a number of additional challenges which people don't talk about. So one of them is literally right now, everybody's streaming all of their credentials and private keys for that matter to LLM providers. So Anthropic and OpenAI right now probably have access to everybody's accounts because they literally in the logs like explicitly have your bearer like auth key and API keys to everything that your Claw or whatever LLM used. Even the codexes and Claude codes are doing that. And so we kind of in a like weird state where right now effectively everybody's like forgot about security and just going nuts. And we are living in a dark forest, right? Internet is becoming, was always a dark forest. We know that in crypto, but it's especially true now when everybody also uses AI tools to kind of, try to exfiltrate everything from everyone. And so Near AI has been building secure infrastructure for private inference, for verifiable inference. So you know what you're using, that like your data is not going anywhere. We're using indeed the secure enclaves and kind of encryption to enable that. But with kind of this rise of claws, indeed the fundamental issues are in the harness, not just in the kind of LLMs anymore. And so that's where, we need a harness that is actually like designed with the blockchain principles, right? Meaning there's always somebody attacking you, right? There's always like, even if you're a third-party developer contributing something, they probably are trying to break into your stuff. If you're using somebody's skill, they try to steal your money, right? if you use that mindset, which is again in blockchain, that is kind of how we think about everything, right? Smart contracts are malicious by default. The contributions are malicious, supply chain attacks, etc. So kind of bringing all that expertise and trying to put together a framework that is benefiting that. And then, so to be clear, IronClaw is an open source project. You can run it with your OpenAI or Anthropic. You can run it on your desktop, or you can run it on your laptop. But we also offer hosting, which is in the confidential environment, end-to-end kind of encrypted, and uses private inference as well. So you kind of know that nothing is going anywhere. So it's really about like protection in depth, right? The tools are indeed in WebAssembly. We're using what we use for Near, for the smart contracts, something that we hardened for 7 years. We know that it's really not possible to exploit. We use that for now kind of tool calls. We have indeed credentials stored, encrypted, and injected effectively at the edge versus being funneled through LLM. And so a lot of this kind of thought, and I mean, we still work on it, to be clear. It's still alpha, still kind of needs more work before it's ready for like enterprise adoption. But we believe this is the approach, is like actually using the lessons we have done, using some of the kind of tooling we have. For example, we use MPC for key holding that is delegated as well, so that you effectively can have like a fireblocks for agents, right? Where you have a policy that you deployed that agent can only spend $100, etc. Even if something is like broken out of the LLM loop and like, hey, let's send all the money to somebody else, like the policy on MPC side can stop it, right? So all of this piece is really like, I mean, in a way, you're rebuilding a lot of the lessons we've learned for people, like usually getting phished or getting hacked, and applying that to agents that just runs at 100 miles per hour.
How do you? Yeah, I'm curious to hear about this kind of like harness the permissioning system, because it does feel like, to your point, we kind of keep relearning these things where it's like for the web or for like Linux based systems, we've like very robust permissioning and user systems, and instead we've like thrown that all away and just be like, no, actually, like let's just hope that this model that we've imbued with some character will reason through what it is allowed and not allowed to do, and just give it the master key and kind of hope. And like I feel like in crypto we have gotten very anal, and like everything is locked down to like the minimum possible level. How do you think that kind of plays out in agent land?
I mean, I think we'll just like agent land needs to relearn this, and this is why like crypto is at the good forefront, because we have learned all those lessons. We are living in the dark forest at all times, so like we can apply these lessons. But I think the rest of the world, the rest of like AI, and again, to be clear, like this is right now, it's all over Twitter, but this is still a very like niche, people
extremely niche, yeah, extremely niche behavior.
Right.
There was a story that went viral recently talking about how roughly 1 billion people have used AI tools in the world out of a population of 8 point something billion. So vast majority of humans have not used any AI tools, even though AI tools are free, right? I mean, obviously not in every country, but they're free, at least in a lot of Western countries.
Are you telling me that you're going to get flip phones? Are you going to get flip phones and feature phones to support AI tools?
Well, actually,
I mean, they're not that bandwidth intensive, right? I mean, they're pretty.
Well, I just mean more like to get to the last 3 billion, you're going to have to.
There's a lot of smartphones in emerging markets. No.
Yeah. Market penetration over places that can use it is still like 30%. I saw some number that was claiming it's like 3 billion accessible. The last 3 or 4 billion is going to be much harder than the first 3 billion, and we are already at 1/3 of that.
Wait, what? I don't know. I mean, because OpenAI alone reports like 900 something million monthlies, so like it has to be higher. And then I mean, I agree with the
like
smartphone
WhatsApp
penetration is insanely high. Yeah, like at this point, pretty much everyone has a smartphone, and like you're just getting an API anyway.
And Google search,
the much more important
AI,
stat,
right?
Right. To say nothing. Yeah, Google search. Let's put Google search aside. Gemini, chatbots.
I'm only mainly pointing out that like there was basically some estimate, and I think this was like in that Andreessen report of like AI penetration versus mobile penetration over time, right? And obviously it's like a way faster slope. But then,
well, hold on. The point that I wanted to make, which is I think the more interesting point, is that only 1%, less than 1% of the people who use AI products pay anything. Overwhelmingly, people are on the free tiers, which means that they're getting like, GPT-5 Mini or, Claude Haiku. They're getting the really crappy versions of all these things. and which implies that like they don't see the value. They don't actually think that it's worth paying for frontier level intelligence. And like these things are not expensive. It's like $20 a month, right? Like this is like Netflix. Like there's a lot of services that have higher penetration into the normal world compared to AI, which tells you like take that. So 1% of people using AI products, 90% of people have never used any AI product at all, or like 85% have never used any AI products. Of those, 1% of people are paying any money at all. And of those, a tiny fraction are doing crazy shit like OpenClaw. So although it's very viral on Twitter and everyone's talking about it, and it's it's cocktail party conversation, the reality is very few people have touched this stuff. This is the fringe of the fringe, the frontier of the frontier. I was actually on stage yesterday at NearCon arguing with Arjun, the co-CEO of Kraken. And I was on stage talking about how this stuff is really exciting, but it's really it's really the frontier. It's really the Wild West. It's extremely dangerous, and it's going to be a while until the stuff is hardened enough that you're actually going to want to give it money and just let it rip. And Arjun was arguing, like, no, why are you talking like this? Like, actually, it's already there. It's so close. And his claim was that he was going to have 100% of his portfolio managed by an AI within 6 to 12 months. And I was like, I think you're high. I think you're out of your mind. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. So like, I think there's wildly different perceptions, even within people who are living on the frontier, about how close we are to this stuff being ready for prime time. Illia, what is your take on that question?
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably more in Arjun camp, but it's going to be Arjun and few thousand other people who are approaching that in like 6 months. I think like we can harden. So first of all, like the coding has changed over past 2 months. Like, I mean, everyone on our team uses some kind of AI to write code. And yes, we were using Cursor and like IDE co-pilots before, but this is going away. Nobody's writing code anymore. Like we're just talking to a machine, right? And like, yes, it is frontier of frontier, but this is the new world. The new world is like you actually design your software in such a way such that the machine can just code it and like it figures out how to debug and test it itself, right? Like
People
the
were
only
telling
thing you
me
now
last
need to
night-
figure out is how to tell it to figure out how to test it
Right.
correctly.
People were telling me last night that like the new street cred in SF is like how many agents you have running in the background while you're out. And they're
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, if you have like less than 10, you're like not really cool. Like if 10 to 15 is like how all the cool kids are at. Or it's like that. What's your Anthropic bill while you're away? Like that's like the sign of how cool you are and how hardcore of an engineer you are. So it does.
I mean,
it
is about like it's actually becoming interesting because it's bounded by how much context you can manage of different workflows, like work streams running in parallel. And it's
Right.
yeah, it is a very interesting, like it again, it's exercises at different functions that like as engineer you usually don't. It's more again like it's like you managing a bunch of people.
Right.
But
Engineering is traditionally very single threaded, and this is more like playing a real time strategy game. It's like you're playing StarCraft,
correct, yeah.
and like jumping between different contexts and like trying to control all of your economy at the same time as you're attacking an enemy. Like that kind of fast context switching seems like that's what all these cracked 21-year-old engineers are all learning how to do.
Yeah, I mean I have a couple clodes running right now in the background writing code.
Only a couple?
Well,
That's
I'm on a call
How
here, so
embarrassing. Yeah.
I am curious. I mean, how do you think about like how using coding agents is going to intersect with crypto, which obviously is a very different standard around like code quality. I mean, there's just a story, I think it was like last week about like Moonwell, like they vibe coded some update, and then like there was an Oracle exploit as a result because you can see like Claude is like a co-author in the commit. So clearly it was like having Claude write it. And so to your point, with really robust testing, you can be sort of loose on the inputs and strict on the outputs. But it feels like even still we, in theory, have extremely strict testing and formal verification, but even that isn't sufficient to catch all the bugs, and it's very deliberately written code.
Yeah, so there's like a multitude of things here. One is exactly right now. So right now, this AI coding systems, they are very spotty, meaning they kind of look at some of the files and then they make a diff and and it's very good at passing its own tests. So it writes its own tests and it will pass them, right? so if your tests are wrong, right, or if your tests are not covering the cases, and it leaves a lot of kind of slop and like not implemented things, and sometimes just like not handling state transitions correctly. And so right now effectively the job is figure out how to test all the state transitions, right? Like literally that's the first thing. Okay, what is my state machine, how to test it, etc. The with smart contracts obviously extremely more valuable, but all the auditors now are just using AI on the other side as well, right? So like I've definitely like copy pasted an audit for a smart contract into check if this is GPT generated, and it was like 78% GPT. So like we kind of already in this chicken and egg AI on both sides problem. And so for me, the only way to get out of this is actually formal verification, because that is actually a mathematical proof that code does exactly this, what spec is saying. Now, you still may have problems in spec, and so you actually need to design the whole flow around it, and this is something that we have like a whole thread on. How do you design a blockchain in such a way that the formal verification is on a transactional level, right? When you send a transaction, you can attach the spec that you care about, right? So your wallet says like, hey, I want to make sure that this smart contract will never lose my money, right? Or under the scenarios like of whatever lending liquidations, that's only the reasons when it's do it. And so you can actually check this at the transactional level. So that's something that, again, I think we will need to evolve really quickly to support this type of thing. So I mean, this is, again, we're learning all these lessons, and I think like blockchain space is indeed on the forefront because we just have way higher standards for this.
It's interesting. So YQ, who's one of the founders of AltLayer, he created this project which he called ETH 2030, which is basically taking the Ethereum 2030 roadmap that Vitalik has described and just vibe coding the whole thing using Claude. And so he like tried to one shot basically like the entire Ethereum roadmap, and they created something. It passes a lot of the tests, I think almost all the tests. The problem is that apparently it's like 50 times slower than Ethereum. Like it's extremely inefficient, and like, but it does have the stuff, I think, is my understanding. So it's like it's a little bit like when Claude, if you guys remember when Opus 4.5 was released, they showed that they'd implemented a browser, and they were like, look, it can like open the Google homepage, which was true. It couldn't do anything else. Like and almost anything else, it would just like break. But technically, it could like render, it could like fetch and render the Google homepage. And I think recently they also did like with 4.6, they showed the C compiler.
Yeah, it was also not good.
Yeah, it was like, you can like do a hello world, but you try to compile like MySQL or something, and it just totally collapses. You can't really do stuff. So I think it's still not at the phase that you can really write complex software without a lot of human intervention. But it's like, we're starting to get to something that can, really building these scaled projects. It's no longer a hard no. It's a soft no, or it's a like, you probably shouldn't,
Well, I think that the interesting thing for me, like as an engineer, that happened is that before some things were like, this is too complicated even to try. Now you just like, I have an idea, I put it in Claude, it tries it. And it's probably like, will require a lot more work to get it. But like you get, 80% to validate if this idea even makes sense to try, right?
Yeah, it's amazing.
Agent Marketplace. Yeah, I just built it. Like I've been thinking about it for a year and a half, right? This is something that when we built Intents, when we started building Intents, that was the idea. That was like, how do we enable agents to do? And obviously back then, none of this worked. So we actually built, crypto focused Intents. But I was like, okay, I know exactly how it should work. I can describe that. It went and built it. It took, obviously a bunch more work to get it to like polish and be able to launch. But it removes that barrier completely.
Tarun, let's bring you in here. What's your take on how agentic coding meets crypto?
So I think, to be honest, my personal usage is not actually writing contracts, but writing all the scaffolding of, okay, I want to use these 5 contracts and these 5 protocols. Like, here's a script, like do this. I use it more for like plumbing together things between contracts or between chains, where I don't want to like think about, writing the TypeScript or Python that is orchestrating stuff. But on the contract stuff, I feel like, I spent a lot of time kind of doing a little bit of what like I described with like trying to find exploits that existed, and I think it's actually pretty good for finding existing exploits. I think if you give it sort of like novel exploits, you still kind of get stuck a little bit, even with a lot of hints. So I'm just like uncomfortable with the idea of writing de novo smart contract code ever from these yet. Like I'm not saying that won't change, right? Illia's formal verification world is supposed to make me never have to worry about that. But until that world exists, I think I like using it for glue code where I don't have to think about the real security vulnerabilities, right? Like I want to make some complicated DeFi position that adjusts itself like perfect. It's really good for that. And that's kind of where I see the right now aspect of things, like that's sort of the easiest intersection. But I think the long-term thing is one thing about agents that I think is, actually, well, maybe I don't know if I should save this for our Citrini when we talk about that. So, but one thing about maybe this is which is a natural segue, but one thing I think about the doomerism that you see a lot of people have is like, hey, we're gonna have all these agents. Agents are all gonna replace people, and employment goes down, world ends, whatever. Right? That's like the doomer story. The other mindset, the abundance mindset of like, I can have a million agents like doing a bunch of work for me at the same time, is a very different type of like network effect, right? Like the barrier to getting started for things is like very low now, right? Like there's a million ideas you have that like in the past you've been like, oh, I have to spend like a day writing all this Python code, whereas like now it's like it spent 5 minutes writing a prompt and then a few other prompts to correct some mistakes it made, and like now I got to try this thing and maybe the experiment failed, but at least I got to try it. So the lower barrier to entry to me sort of is a little bit more like crypto, right? Because in crypto, it's like I can have 10,000 wallets Sybil attacking a protocol. And in some sense, I think the network effects for agents are going to look like things that are a little more like crypto, where like the thing that's most valuable is like liquidity and something you can't copy. Like explicitly, no matter how many copies you have, you're not going to be able to split it up. Which is, I think, why the SaaS stuff is, the doomerism like this is coming from the SaaS stuff, because like a lot of that stuff is.
Let's cover the Citrini thing,
Maybe
just so people know what we're talking about. So at this point, I'm sure everyone has heard of this massive Citrini article, came out a few days ago, called the 2028 Global Intelligence Crisis. So it's kind of a fanfic, it's sort of like a fictional
Bear
story
porn, they're
about what
calling it.
might happen. It's bear porn, doomer porn.
I mean, the White
People have
House
different
commented on it
descriptions for
today.
Did they?
Seriously?
Good.
Yeah.
That's
I just saw.
ridiculous.
I just saw this.
So
like-
Citrini. So just to be clear, Citrini is like a former. I think he's like a med tech entrepreneur who like then pivoted into being like a macro kind of substacker. He runs one of the most popular finance substacks, and he just writes about general kind of macro worldview. He's somebody very well followed on Twitter. A lot of crypto people like him. He likes some crypto people. So he wrote this long form article describing a quote unquote fictional macro memo from June 2028, after which point the S&P 500 has dipped 38% from the highs. There's massive white collar displacement. There's all sorts of quote unquote ghost GDP that supposedly there's supposed to be all this great productivity, but it never circulates through the economy. Consumer spending collapses. And basically you have huge wipeouts of companies like Amex, Visa, DoorDash, ServiceNow. And he claims that, basically AI bullishness is going to be so disruptive so suddenly that it's going to cause huge financial wipeouts and company profit margins to collapse. And one of the vectors through which this happens is through crypto. So he claims that one of the reasons why the credit card companies are likely to lose a lot is because agents are going to realize that they can settle more effectively using stablecoins on Solana or Ethereum L2s for fractions of a penny and completely cut out interchange. And his claim is that there's so many of these friction-based business models that exist in the real economy, such as credit cards, such as platforms like DoorDash, travel platforms, et cetera. And he thinks that stablecoin rails are going to disintermediate and reduce a lot of the margins that are otherwise captured by corporate America. So very, very, very contentious article. It's gotten like 25 million reads.
I mean,
think, on
tons
Twitter.
of newspapers and Twitter It's like the first time
Yeah.
I've seen them agree.
It has-
Everyone was
it
like
has
attributing like
wiped out,
200 billion
like,
of
I think
market
a
cap
trillion-
lost to it.
I
And
think,
maybe it's
wasn't it
more
like a
than I don't
trillion?
know.
Yeah.
I
it was a
think it's
huge
attributed to
loss
it,
in-
but I'm also like, yeah, the other
I don't know. The
macro, I'm
IBM
thinking,
thing, I don't know why the IBM thing, which was actually one of the larger components, gets attributed to it. So it's like, it's the accounting
that was
is a
because
little bit-
Anthropic said they
Anthropic
can write
released a
code.
blog
That's
post.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, Anthropic
That's
wrote a
my
blog
point.
post. They didn't even
I think
announce anything new. They just wrote a marketing piece that
Yeah.
was already a capability that existed.
This
do
is like
feel like-
2017 crypto partnership marketing.
Yeah, partnership confirmed. It does feel like something has changed in the X algorithm because like this thing went super viral and the something big is happening post also got like 80 million views and I had like people
I think
who
they're just promoting long reads.
so I'm like
Yeah,
Because they
promoting
have this
long reads.
competition. They have
yeah
the
Nikita
competition
can
for
basically
views, so.
psyop everybody by just promoting random
bear
articles in
porn.
the feed. Yeah, because I had like people like friends who are like in academia. It's like a philosophy professor like was texting this to me and I'm like, why are you seeing this? Like this has nothing to do with what you're doing. But I didn't really like the piece. I thought it was bear porn. I thought it was not very good bear porn, to be honest. I think
What made it
like
not
a
be
large-
bear porn?
so I think there's this existing kind of debate around, oh, will there be mass employment because all these companies are gonna just automate away all these like white collar jobs. I think that is up for debate. I think I maybe take not as bearish a view on that. But a large part of the thrust of the piece is about this agentic story that you're talking about, where hey, there are all these big companies that mostly deal in software that basically exist as this intermediary for a marketplace, and they take a cut, and that's their main business. And stablecoins basically disintermediate that. And I think there's a couple issues with this. One, I mean, this was kind of the same argument as like this sort of aggregator theory as what happened in the early internet. That like, oh well, you're not gonna you're gonna put all the travel agents out of business because you're just gonna go directly to search for the thing that you want, and like therefore it's the sort of intermediaries get commoditized out and they sort of have no pricing power. And I mean, I think it's true to a certain extent, but like, hey, it ends up being that there are a lot of other subsequent jobs that kind of downstream from that. But the big point on this like this macro thing is why is this bad for the economy? It's kind of like it reminds me a little bit of like the broken window fallacy. If I'm familiar with this, where it's like if someone breaks a storekeeper's window, and it's like, well, that's good for the economy because then someone's gonna he's gonna pay for the window to be created, and the person who makes the window is gonna pay for other things. And it's like, well, actually, that money could have been spent elsewhere that would have been more productive versus just breaking the window. And for this, it's like, oh, is it good or bad that Visa right now takes 2.5% of every single transaction, and if that goes down to zero, wouldn't that be really bad? And it's like, well, the sort of other way to think about it is like, what if it took 20% today? Would we be in like a worse economy or a better economy? And I think it'll be a much worse economy if there's a 20% tax on every single transaction. A lot of things just wouldn't happen. We'd see way lower volumes, and so I think ultimately things are trending towards efficiency, and this is just another example of that. And yeah, in the short term, there is going to be some economic disruption, but like, yeah, we want a more efficient, a more properly allocated economy, and like that seems to be actually what the piece is about, which is good.
Yeah, I would say so. I agree with you. I think that the piece. I mean, one question is like, why did this piece go so viral? And I think the answer. I mean, a lot of people, especially if you read like the Wall Street Journal or whatever, or The Economist, they like look at this thing and they're like, this guy's like a medical entrepreneur. Like, why is his macro thing getting upvoted over the banks and over all these other financial analysts? Which I think is very satisfying to see as like a kind of extremely online person is like, yeah, one of us, we did it. I think the reason why it's so compelling is because it's written in this way that is this kind of in media res, backwards looking, like, oh, this already happened. It's actually it's very well written. It's very tantalizing and believable the way that he draws out the whole thing. It's not written like a bank analyst report, which nobody would care if like, oh, JP Morgan wrote some report about AI. Who gives a shit? So the first thing, I think it was well written. Now that being said, what's wrong with the piece? A lot of people had very good takes that they were like, oh, he wrote about 20 different industries. I don't know about all those, but I know about this one. And so like I know a lot about marketplaces, right? I know a lot about DoorDash, and like his description of DoorDash is just complete nonsense because like there are competitors to DoorDash. People do multi-home, and yet DoorDash is still a dominant player because like it's mostly not a software company, it's a logistics company. And like there's all this data that you just vibe coding some alternative to DoorDash does not give you the ability to just like compete DoorDash's margins to zero. It's just not how it works.
For what it's worth, he got his responses on Twitter were all just about how much hate he was getting over the DoorDash
Is that right? No, but then somebody made the same argument about ServiceNow and like a lot of these other businesses.
Yeah.
That it's like, okay, if he got this one this wrong, like the other ones that I don't know about, probably he'll, it's like a sort of what's the effect that physicist talks about?
Oh,
Gell-Mann
it's
talking
amnesia.
about?
yeah.
Gell-Mann amnesia.
Yes. Exactly. It feels like a little bit of this, where like every single little industry you kind of get a little bit wrong, but it like sounds plausible to someone who doesn't know that much about it. But the core problem I have with this piece, which I think is like the real weakness of the piece, is that he basically describes this huge demand shock, right? Huge supply shock, huge demand shock, and the inability of the market to recover from this. And I think this is plausible. Like there are parts of it that are plausible about financial shocks and like assumptions that are made in lending and underwriting that are going to be violated when you realize, oh, there's a bunch of bad debt over here. Very plausible how you can have some kind of financial snarls that end up, resonating through the economy. The problem with the story, I think there's two fundamental problems. One, no explanation for where the money's going. Like who's making all the money and what are they doing with the money, right? And he just doesn't address it, right? What's that? Okay, so AI companies, meaning that like, oh, shareholders are making a lot of money and they also have employees who are making all this money. And what do they do with that money?
But it's
the answer is they invest it.
100,000 versus 100 million.
Right. So the answer is that they invest it. And so where does the money that they invest, because they're not spending it on yachts. So they make money, they invest it. Where does that money go?
If they were spending on yachts, that would, if they were spending on yachts, that also will pump some parts of the economy.
Yeah, no, right, exactly, right, fine. But like there's a demand shock that comes from another side, right? The money doesn't disappear. We don't shoot it into space, right? Like you have to explain where does the rest of the money go? And he doesn't explain, he doesn't even address that part, which is a problem, right?
Good actually, this is somebody else told me, but good to compare with actually 2020. Because we had a massive, effectively unemployment / no work, people are not working shock to, United States, but also globally. And people were like, okay, I'm getting like a stimulus check here. The economy was actually flowing. It was kind of a bull market across, crypto, and like we actually had all of this money circulating through the system, right? And so, yeah, that's probably not sustainable, and there's like better system that needs to be to kind of balance it. But like the reality is, I think that the piece that to me kind of, I do think that the labor to capital mechanism is going to start shifting, right? It's already been shifting over past, multiple decades, right? Realistically, and capital becoming more and more productive than labor, and like with this like AI being kind of this pinnacle of automation, right? This is just going to accelerate. And so that doesn't mean that that means that we're going to be fine living in a world where there's a lot more people that are not actually contributing productively to the, quote unquote GDP. But that doesn't mean that that's going to like break the whole system. It's just like we're going to keep adjusting.
So I'm very, very skeptical of the story. I'm very skeptical of the story.
I will say there's a huge number of like retorts to this post because it angered people so much, right? Like I feel like I saw hundreds. The only ones that I personally, but all the replies that were fast reply guy things for engagement, most of them were kind of AI slop. If I'm going to be honest, they just were like, "What is wrong with this?" Like, Claude, tell me what to write. But the ones I thought were actually good were the ones that were comparing this style of posts to like Marx. And like Marx writing about the Industrial Revolution of like how it's going to wipe out all jobs forever and humanity and labor has to fight back, and how it's like a very similar kind of like the way the story is written is kind of similar to some Marx writings from the 19th century. And I kind of think that's sort of what inevitably happened. Like you're assuming a sort of static world where capital and people don't reallocate themselves, or that they don't train themselves. Like for instance, the white collar worker blowout. I'm like, all this means is that the white collar worker is going to be like 10,000 times more efficient. So you will need fewer of them. But then also the bar has gone up where everyone's expected to be doing like 10,000 times more things. Right. And I think like that aspect is always this assumption that everything is static and that the worker is static forever is like, I think, a kind of hidden fallacy in a lot of these arguments that like people don't adapt at all. Now, I'm not saying there won't be some people who can't adapt.
Because a lot of this argument that you're making, Tarun, is also kind of doesn't account that AI, as soon as it's effectively in a full loop and it doesn't make mistakes and kind of doesn't leave the slope behind. Like, I think like, when we had like, tractors and like plants, like all of those industrial transformations, yes, they were elevating like, hey, now a person can do 10 persons jobs with a tractor, right? But with AI, there's no like, again, right now there's a limit. Context, as soon as compaction hits, you're screwed. But like, imagine we actually figure out how to do infinite context, or in some hierarchical format. Like, you now have no natural limit. Like right now, one person can manage 7 people. Then those people manage. Like, we have this hierarchical organizations for a reason. But with AI, you actually can have like a kind of a flat scaling of a
So
AI organization.
so actually, I was like, I listened to this lecture from this economist that was kind of interesting about how there are a lot of jobs that somehow persist even when automation exists, because there's like people are willing to pay for the more expensive human version. And an example of this is piano players. There is certainly automated piano players. They've been around since the 19th century, let alone like recordings and everything. Yet the actual wage, while there are fewer piano players, the actual wage of piano players relative to inflation has gone up since the 19th century to now, because there's a view that it's sort of this necessary good to have the old fashioned thing. And I think basically there's going to be way more of those types of jobs, which we are kind of ignoring.
My thesis is everybody will be in the jobs that are not actually productive from an economy perspective.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
sports, e-gaming, like all of those things are like, I mean, there's obviously entertainment industry on top of it, but like the reality is,
yeah. All right, Tom.
No, but like
jump in here.
Us competing with each other, like faster running is not making a more productive economy, right? It's not creating more output for the economy, but it's self-satisfying. It's
You're saying entertainment is not, doesn't contribute to GDP?
No, entertainment does, but I'm saying that the job
sports
itself,
is entertainment.
Yeah, I mean, everything will be left to entertainment, and we want actually to see real human. Like the thing is, like, you don't care that the robots can run faster than one another, right? Like, we're not gonna watch that. We're gonna see, like, we want to associate with people. So those, I agree, those jobs totally. I'm talking more about like what actually builds the foundation of Maslow pyramid, right?
Sure.
Those things. And that is right now, that is where the trillions of economy is. And I think like that's kind of where, like, we all gonna have stuff to do. Like I don't think this is gonna, like, I don't think that's, if people are afraid of that, this is more that like the fundamental kind of what is forms GDP effectively gonna start shifting.
Yeah, I think it kind of is, again, this like lump of labor, fallacy too, where it's like, people will, find new things to do and find new things that they find valuable, and people will reskill and change different things. And I mean, also not to speak of like, okay, they don't, talk about like Fed policy, and even that's like one of the common retorts. He's like, well, I think they learned their lesson from 2008. So this guy's, I think, also kind of like a gold bugger. It's like, yeah, obviously in like a very high unemployment, deflationary environment, we're going to see interest rate adjustment, and it's, I mean, it could kind of go on, but I think maybe to Tarun's point and to Illia's point, it's like we live in a very dynamic economy, and it's not this kind of like one shot tomorrow. AI is automating everything. People are already kind of adjusting and adapting, and I'm just going to continue to do that.
I mean, I also think the Jevons paradox thing of,
well, the thing I was going to say is that I do think he makes a good point that, like, look, our economy is built on certain foundational assumptions, right? As you say, our financial system is based on certain foundational assumptions about the distribution of wealth, about where value accrues, about who's a good credit risk. And if there is a certain sudden re-rating of risk in the economy, and there are risks in places that they weren't supposed to be, that absolutely can cause a financial crisis. Like, even if there's a productivity boom, there's nothing that in principle stops both things happening simultaneously. That there's a productivity boom, but also there was huge mistakes in underwriting. And that can cause an enormous amount of financial damage, as we saw from the 2008 crisis, right? Like, you look back 2008.
Yeah, but my point is, again, yes, that's reflexive, right? It's like, I think the Fed has learned at this point to like be aggressive in using the tools that they have. So it's like, if you think prime mortgages are going to get hit, we know kind of how to deal with that now. And again, I also think one of my bigger issues with this piece is it's like this kind of cherry picked. I think your world where it's like AI gets so good that everything is completely automated and everyone's out of a job. but it's not so good that it gets super intelligent and it finds a bunch of 0 days and destroys a bunch of critical infrastructure. It's like just good enough to be this like very aligned, beautiful being that we can tame, and like that seems more unlikely to me.
I'm
than,
actually
like,
more afraid of the. I actually think that the second part, finding all the 0 days, is actually faster than it will get good at like a bunch of.
Yeah, that's possible.
Yeah, it's like when you
it's
see an
actually-
alien and it's like, oh, it's a bipedal thing and it has like a head and eyes. It's like, no, that's not what an alien is going to look like. It's going to be like a 5D plasma cloud. It's going to be like 3 body problem. You won't even like recognize what it looks like.
Well, actually, there was a really funny. Speaking of OpenClaw stories, there's this really funny story about this guy who like bought like a DJI drone or like mini, like I forget if it's a drone or like mini helicopter or something, and basically he like told Claude to like, and DJI charges you
The vacuum
for the
Yep.
vacuum. Sorry, vacuum. Right. And DJI charges you for subscription to use the thing. So he told Claudebot, hey, like try to break into this thing. It's like at this IP address on my network, and like use these ports. And Claude found some 0 day in the DJI thing, in the sense that they actually just didn't do any auth of the device. So you could actually log into any of these devices around the world if you found them. And then he like his Claude bot figured out how to scan for this particular device, and then replicated itself to like 700 or 7,000, some number like that, of agents, each controlling all of the different vacuum cleaners. And it was all because like DJI basically had the 0 day. Now it was a kind of dumb 0 day. It's like they have a function that was like check auth, and then it just returned true always, something stupid like that. But like it was still kind of like. It was still kind of like
created its own botnet of vacuum
yeah,
cleaners?
it created its own botnet out of vacuum cleaners, right? Like I thought that was like an amazing story. But
there's
actually,
probably like millions of those things, because on average there's 50. There's and every 1,000 lines of code there's 15 bugs. This has been the stat. And I think this is for humans. I think AI actually may leave more behind if you like don't re-audit it multiple times. And so, yeah, this is like we are actually really need the formal verification, or we're gonna be in a very bad situation.
I agree with that. Okay, one quick thing. So I'm gonna go back to what you're at, like. What do you think about crypto and AI and this Doomer story? I think like agents sort of have network effects that are more like crypto, in the sense that you can have many of them, you can replicate them, and like the only things that work are Sybil resistant things, like things that if I send 500 agents, it doesn't change the value of that thing. So, and in some sense, this is actually the argument instead of the like MasterCard thing I would give for cryptos. Like the agents are better. Crypto is built around making these things Sybil resistant by definition. Whereas like MasterCard is only Sybil resistant by legal force, which is going to be just harder to enforce for these agents, right? Like I think it's fundamentally easy to say. I think agents are just not going to have identities. I'm just going to spin them up on demand on some event if I need it, and then kill it, and make another swarm, then kill it, right? And the only thing that's infrastructure for finance that's actually built around this identityless Sybilness is crypto. And like fundamentally, I think that means all the network effects that these things have should kind of look like the crypto network effects you see. That's sort of I would have rewritten that part. I don't buy the MasterCard thing that he wrote, because there the network effect is like the distribution. It's like really hard to like get vendors to shift, right? Like,
I mean, yes and no. Like it's also crypto been working to shift this, and like it is starting to shift as well, because it is expensive for merchants. Like merchants are taking that price, but even further right now, let's say my agent can just go and talk to the factory in China and just purchase things directly, right? And like if it can negotiate, like let's say there's an agent, they're running an agent there as well, they can just like, oh, can I just send you crypto, right? It's way easier than figure out how to send money into China in any other way, right? And so like to me, this is actually, I mean, again, the agentic marketplace we launched is effectively like a prototype of that, cutting out through the whole distribution, like supply chain pipeline. Because now if you can find that other agent and you have a way to agree with them on something, escrow money and pay, crypto indeed is the best way to do that. Because I actually, the piece that everyone who talks about payments actually gets wrong is because it's not about payments. Payments is just the final piece of a commercial transaction. It's about finding the counterparty. It's about figuring out how to actually agree on the terms. which are not just money. It's delivery time. It's, like what happens in force majeure? What if the truck gets flipped, right? Etc. And then at the end, you deliver money, right? And like maybe you have insurance over this, maybe you have escrow. Like that's the whole flow. And this is where agents have, like if the two agents are talking, they effectively can do all of this way faster, way cheaper. They don't need a legal lawyer, like two lawyers effectively to jump in after the primary agreement to go and negotiate, red line the contract, billing, invoicing, etc. Right? So like that flow gets compressed, and that is actually where trillions of dollars have been moved. Right? Not the e-commerce part where we buy from Amazon is actually less of a problem, right? Because my credit card is already on Amazon. It's really the I need to purchase 10 tons of steel and need to ship them, and I need insurance and reinsurance and like financing to do this. And so that like can be sped up and simplified a lot.
Okay, so let me let's see if I can flesh this out. It sounds like what you're saying is almost that the place where AI is going to be more disruptive in commerce is on the discovery side, right? Like the reason why we all go to Amazon is that we don't have to go and figure out who is Anchor, who is, I don't know, like all these Wowbox or all these like random Chinese vendors that Amazon has diligence and is like, yeah, these people are good enough to be our fulfillment partners to actually sell things to American consumers. Your AI agent doesn't need Amazon to go and aggregate that information for you. It can go to the source, parse all huge amounts of information, and basically does not require aggregation in order to, like the reason why aggregation is there is to save you the work and the discovery cost.
Because humans have, low context, right? That's
right. We have a small context window, right? Like and the AI has a very big context window. So if the AI is going and like actually checking every single flight or checking every single vendor or checking every single whatever, going on MLS and checking every single listing, that is the reason why commerce is going to get disrupted. And that's why the credit card system, like, so how does that connect to the credit card system? Why would it not be
because
that? Like,
like,
yes,
you may as well just
cards.
pay directly, right? Because like you don't like if you're already doing this, you don't need to go through like the slow also settlement process and figure out how to
that's true. So settlement process on credit cards is slow, right? You get 30-day holdback, you got the chargebacks. But arguably what the credit card system is doing is it is the long arm of the law, right? The credit card system, right? Visa is basically the monopoly on violence that says, merchant, if you don't behave, we're not taking you, we're not giving you the money, right? And that does serve some purpose. Like if I go directly, my AI agent goes to this like, vendor in China and is like, yo, here's $25, please send me a, USB charger. And the USB charger never shows up. There is no enforcement record. There's no Leviathan. There's no way that I can enforce anything on this person besides some like, leave a bad review.
Well, except, we have escrow. You can effectively insure this. You can we have all the financial
escrow. Who's holding the escrow though? Who's holding the escrow?
The smart contract.
Escrow now is the right. No, what's the Oracle? Right? Where's the Oracle?
Yeah, what's the Oracle?
New MasterCard. That's
the AI agent.
Arjun MasterCard.
I think
there's
think
another AI agent.
Tom.
Claros Court.
No, AI agent that both sides agreed is a resolver, right?
So you're imagining private law enforcement through another AI agent. Like this is like what you're describing is like anarcho-capitalism. Is that what you're imagining?
This is the agent marketplace. This is market near the AI.
Yeah, I don't disagree with Illia's view in the sense.
You think that's how it's going to work? You think you're going to elect for a third-party agent?
There's going to be a part of the economy that's like that. That's no doubt. That's what.
But you can still rely on some jurisdiction. Like jurisdiction is just because the thing is like you have all of the interaction between agents is fully documented, right? And so if like whatever
AI, how does enforcement work? Like for digital goods, I get this. For digital goods,
but like you can have this contract in some jurisdiction. You can literally have this. The two AIs effectively build a contract, like a legal contract.
Okay.
Legal
I
contract.
thought we were talking about no legal contract. So now we're back in legal contract.
No, it's still a legal contract. They just don't need lawyers between them. They've been trained on all the legal contracting.
So the AIs are the lawyers. Okay, fine. But let's say I want to enforce. How do I enforce against a Chinese company?
Well, same thing as if you're doing it yourself right now, right?
Well, that's the thing. Like that's why I like Amazon, right? Amazon actually can enforce against a Chinese company. I can't do that.
Well, your AI agent can.
I think Tom has the right idea, which is like there's just going to be a new MasterCard or many new MasterCards that just are the judge agent and then also go file the lawsuit, right? Like and it probably just relies on
Why are
like
they filing
one.
lawsuits? No, hold on. Either we're in agent land and there's a third party that we all trust as like basically arbitrators, right? So
How
like
do I get?
is where
How do I
arbitrators
seize
are.
my collateral back? Like if it's
But,
off
like,
chain.
I mean,
they
so
hold
for
they hold the escrow.
Yeah, the money is in escrow. So I can tell you how this works right now, right? The money are in escrow. On delivery, right, the both sides need to say effectively, good, money got released. If one of the sides says no, this is case moved to the dispute agent, to the judge, who evaluates the case, right? And effectively decides like return all the money, split the money, or give it to the whoever delivered the goods, right? That judge can be filed as a court case, like in a actual physical court, if both sides didn't agree with the judgment, right? In some scenarios. Now, what is missing in the system is effectively now as a worker, I can actually take a loan. I can effectively do financing against the escrow, right? Like because this is I mean, it's the same thing that like Costco, for example, literally has no working capital because the invoices come in 30 days later and they sell on average faster than 30 days. So actually like literally money that they sell the stuff they didn't pay for yet. And so like those kind of things now you can start doing because you can actually borrow against an escrow given reputation, etc., like the history you've built on this marketplace. And so we can start building all the financial instruments, but now they are actually linked into the kind of smart contracts and escrow payments.
All right. Well, this has gotten very sci-fi.
One thing we have kind of buried here is, for people who aren't familiar, Illia is one of the co-authors on the original Transformers paper, which obviously spawned these GPTs and this entire agent sort of thing that we're going through. And so, Illia, I'm curious, like, how it kind of feels to see everything unfold, and I don't know, stuff that you thought that happened that you think wasn't going to happen, and vice versa.
Yeah, I mean, it's exciting to see it. Like, the context actually, I was excited about AI since I was like 10 years old, right? I tried to build my first neural network when I actually didn't know linear algebra yet, so that didn't work very well. So yeah, I mean, it's exciting to see this. The Near AI actually in 2017 started to build effectively what now is called vibe coding, right? Like I was pitching that, hey, humans will stop writing code; it will just all AI is doing that. And you will, and all the SaaS will be gone because you could just write your own software.
But don't you feel sad that program synthesis is now called vibe coding? Because it's like,
yeah. So the naming is very unfortunate.
The name is like sucks.
Yeah. So that's why we need formal verification so we can actually get back
to program synthesis.
Yeah, this is program synthesis, not just some like slope code produced by AI. But yeah, no, I'm just excited. I think the world is going to be reshaping. I'm not doomer about it. I think we're going to adjust with that. Like there's a lot of smart people thinking about what the implications are. I think the capital markets are indeed very flexible to adjust with that. I think there's a control question that obviously, we in blockchain believe that control should not reside with a single party. That I think is important. But overall, I think we're just going to continue seeing productivity gains. We're going to continue seeing we can do more. And at the same time, we're going to keep expanding what we can do and what we want to do, right? And keep spending our time in a way we're enjoying, like more than we need to, because need to earn money, etc. So like I think that shift is just going to make everyone kind of happier. And like the question is like how to get distributed across the full world, right? How do we get into Africa? How do we get into South Asia, etc. But yeah, I'm just excited.
Fair enough. And do you think is AI going to save crypto?
I think I don't know about say. I mean, let's be clear, right? The adoption of crypto is at the highest mark it's ever been, right? The stable coins are being used everywhere. The infrastructure is being used. Like more and more people are leveraging it across the board. This is like the identity solutions, like all those things are using effectively blockchain one way or another. And yes, markets honestly they're so on time. It's kind of funny, but like Bitcoin is on its the halving streak. I'm sure everybody's looking at the chart like halving to halving, but like I think the peak, like all-time high of Bitcoin was literally like 2 weeks off from the all-time high of two previous cycles. And so like it's kind of funny because like so much macro changed, but like at the end, Bitcoin just does the thing that it does.
Some
I
eternal
would-
truths.
I would say the one thing is that crypto people seem to always have some of the right things to think about things that work in AI. I think like if you look at the data center build out, obviously that was like 90% crypto people. If you look at this kind of agent finance stuff, I think like I sometimes look at some of these fintech things people are doing with agents and they are idiotic and siblable. Like, and I think there's a lot of stuff people in crypto know about how things can be abused that's actually very useful in an agent world that I think
Very good point,
AI
yeah.
people are too optimistic about. And I think hopefully we can bring the realistic pessimism to that world is where I think.
I mean,
We've been dealing
I
with
call it
bots
the
for a long time in
multiplayer.
crypto.
Yeah, multiplayer view. Like AI companies usually work in a single player, right? They're like, we're building it for another user, and this is how they're going to use it. Crypto built for multiplayer, right? Like they're going to be malicious players, they're going to be great players. You need to value align them, you need to incentivize them. Anybody can join at any time. Like, how do you design for that, right? That's a mindset difference, and we're bringing that to AI for sure with all of the tools we built.
Yeah, no, it's a fascinating time. Illia, we thank you for coming on and sharing your perspective with us, and we look forward to see how all this stuff plays out. We'll be back
Thank
next
you
week.
for having me.
Thanks, everybody.